How South Korea became a developed economy against all odds. South Korea was an underdeveloped country that managed to become one of the more successful emerging economies. The country was under Japanese occupation until the 15th of August 1945. Its economy was dependent on the Japanese economy, with the Japanese owning 94% of the listed companies in 1940. The partition of the North and South Korea also led to some problems because 92% of electricity was based in the North as well as most of the natural resources. With most of the heavy machinery based in the northern part of the country that became North Korea, there was high unemployment in the South after 1945, with output at around 20% of what it was 5 years earlier. The population of the country grew very rapidly due to people migrating from the communist North and those who returned from Japan after the war. There was shortage of food and high inflation which led to even more food shortages. The Korean War was estimated to cost around $3 billion and over 1 million deaths, but real GNP began to grow at around 5% p.a. after 1953, whilst agricultural production was reducing at around 6% p.a. Manufacturing was growing at around 9% p.a. between 1958 and 1960. At the same time, population grew at around 2.9% p.a. From 1953 to 1960, the country imports in the form of loans came from the UN $120 million and $1.75 billion from the USA 131. South Korea was ruled by military regimes between May 1961 and December 1963, due to political instability in the country at the time, but the rate of inflation continued to rise. The civilian government came into power in 1964 with a plan to reduce monetary expansion to curtail inflationary growth, reform the exchange rate system, encouraged exports and reduced imports. The government of Korea was quick to respond to any slowdown in the economy with a range of actions such as imposing fixed interest rate on deposits or loans. A number of factors led to an increase in exports, including the devaluation of the currency, the won, which led to Korean goods being cheaper at the same time that the yen was appreciating. This led to reduction in the balance of payment deficit and an increase in foreign exchange reserves. The GDP increased by 15% in 1973, manufacturing grew by 30% and export increased by 100%. One of the most fundamental changes to the development of the South Korea was the transformation of the economy from a traditional agricultural-based economy to a technologically advanced one. To achieve this, the share of the primary industry such as agriculture decreased from 47% in 1953 to 13% in 1986 as manufacturing increased from 10% to 30% in the same period. The transformation was in the form of light industries which started to process imported semi-finished products, followed by investment in other sectors such as electronics, petroleum etc., which provided the basis for economic growth. Like Japan, the heavy industry products were used at home before being exported. The structural changes in the economy were modeled after the Japanese industrial plan. The Korean government supported the development of large private companies known as chaebol, which they supported, managed and financed. The president passed a law making himself a life president. The government became authoritarian, but the people were ready to trade off their freedom for technological advancement. The government's support for the large organizations allowed them to grow exponentially as government support for private companies fell. There were more monopolies in Korea, with 9 of the largest companies in Korea amongst the top 500 companies in the world. The GDP growth rate in the South Korea averaged around 10% p.a. between 1960s and the end of the 1980s and to around 3% to 6% thereafter, whereas over the same period, the developed nations including the UK grew at around 5% p.a. Growth in exports was around 18% p.a. and imports at around 12% p.a. between 1960 and 2010. In their assessments of the Korean economic development, S. Chu 1990 and C. Frank et al. 1975 believed that the success of South Korea had 4 common traits. 1. Strong survival traits which are common to people who are used to surviving in difficult circumstances. The country lacked natural resources and had to economize their resources to survive. 2. Traditional belief in the importance of education and investment in people. This led to increase in the level of education due to compulsory education and the encouragement of technology-based training. 3. Government policies on the need for economic development. The role of the government in supporting innovation, R&D and the enactment of development-oriented policies. Focusing on the need for economic growth by implementing development plans. 4. The new economic order allowed for the removal to barriers and the need for competition. This allowed for increased production to absorb excess labor created by migration. The internationalization of the market helped new products made to be exported. The same with the movement of capital as they reached saturation points in the West. The latecomer advantage also helped as the country took already developed technology to new levels.